Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing great. I'm doing fabulous, thank you very much, and all the better for spending quality time with you, because I love nothing better than sharing a lovely story. There's nothing cozier in the entire world, and especially when the weather is beginning to get so much colder out there, there's nothing better than snuggling up and listening to a lovely story. But before we get started, don't forget to get that drink, whatever it is you drink, and I hope you're going to tell me about it, especially if it is rather unusual. I love hearing from you. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, the year was 1982. The time was 10 on a Tuesday morning in early spring. I drove my bright pink Ford Mustang down the long ribbon of asphalt in a pretty green, leafy up-and-coming neighbourhood, not far from Denver in Colorado. The sprawling individual properties were quite wide apart on either side of the road, while the picturesque pavements were lined with statuesque red oak trees in the throes of early maturity. Some of the properties big enough for stabling a few horses. I loved the area, as although close to town, it had that rural, rustic, convivial feeling about it, and was heavily wooded, boasting a plethora of fabulous hiking and horse-riding trails. It wasn't uncommon to see horses trotting down the road, a sight which was always so pleasing to me, as it makes me think of summer picnics, icy cold glasses of homemade lemonade, and days on the sun lounger, soaking in the early morning sunshine like a salamander. At this poignant time in my life, I was living in a tacky apartment in the cosy, quaint little antique town of Cripple Creek, near Denver, with the county seat of Teller County, which was known for its gold, with over 500 mines that churned over 22 million ounces of gold in 2 decades. Quite astonishing, really. In truth, to be blatantly honest with you, my apartment was more like a glorified run-down bedsit, with a tiny kitchenette attached and a bathroom, or with ancient prehistoric fittings and fixtures going back to the Ark. Indeed, some of the electric connections were incredibly dodgy, so much so that I was scared I might electrocute myself when using the iron. I had rented this inauspicious, uncongenial place from a very disagreeable, hard-hearted landlord, Mr. Nigel Furrow, who had taken to despising me all the more after learning about my altercation with local girl and diner owner Kirsten Tanner. You see, all the townsfolk loved Kirsten Tanner, as if she was a mother, daughter or friend to them that they were personally acquainted with. If you hurt Kirsten Tanner, then you were a social outcast, a pariah, a persona non grata if you like, someone that they didn't want to know at all. I could feel the hostile energy towards me in town bubbling over like jam in a cauldron on the hob. Personally, it was directed towards me like a feisty windstorm that wasn't going to recede any time soon. All this over a grievous misunderstanding, but certainly when mud sticks, it sticks hard. It's very difficult to remove. It was clear no one wanted me in town. They even said as much. Mr. Furrow was flinging me out of my apartment in a week's time. After that I had nowhere to go, no money either. I'd lost my job as a waitress at a popular diner, where I'd made the very foolish off-the-cuff decision to date a very pleasant-looking stranger, a cowboy type with a fun sense of humour, an attractive southern drawl. I remember he'd strolled into the diner very casually, with an air of indifference, looking like Clint Eastwood in his heyday on a country and western screen set. He had that kind of confident, self-assured swagger. I had been waitressing his table, and noticed my boss, Kirsten Tanner, giving the stranger dagger-like looks that could so easily kill. I had observed her bright blue eyes looking furious as she shook her wispy mane of long blonde hair indignantly, while continuing to cast pestiferous fleeting looks at the stranger. Under her breath I heard her say, "What a bloody cheek! What a bloody cheek! The nerve of the man! I've seen everything now. Typical of him to show up here." I noticed the stranger looking purposely in our direction. He lifted his cowboy hat at Kirsten, gave her a huge cheeky wink, which seemed to ruffle up her feathers, causing her body to jiggle indignantly. I should have guessed that there was history between them. Why I did not, I cannot fathom. I was thinking that Kirsten thought the stranger was full of himself, arrogant, opinionated, assertive. She always hated men like that. I mean, no one looks at a stranger with such a pronounced venom like a black mamba that wants to strike out and bite them. if they don't have an axe to grind with that person. But let's just say, not to put too fine a point on it, the naive, pathetically whimsical little me did not even bat an eyelid, but walked straight into the lion's den, offering myself on a platter to the man as a tasty hors d'oeuvre. Well, not quite. You see, I was to discover that this stranger in town was in fact my boss's ex-husband, Dustin Tanner. Theirs had been a stormy, tempestuous marriage, littered with contentious issues over trust and fidelity, along with a good measure of jealousy thrown into the works, the quintessential ideal ingredients to facilitate the explosive fights and arguments that eventually transpired, that caused the relationship to crumble like pieces of dry wall in your hands, or keel over like a pack of cards. Yet despite everything, it would seem that a burning, hungry passion was smouldering between the divorced couple, as if the flames had been rekindled, while the exaggerated mock and intense hatred they projected towards each other barely even successfully masked the underlying deep love the couple still held for each other, that like a fire had never been extinguished. Ostensibly there were red glowing embers begging for that fire to be ignited again, which everyone in town would love to have seen happen. Well, most people, that is. Everyone seemed to know this invaluable, benignant information, except me, of course. I'd never actually met Dustin Tanner before. I was oblivious to who he was, nor did I know that Kirsten Tanner was actually a divorcee. Little did I know that Kirsten's ex-husband was using me as a pawn to make his ex-wife jealous. It had worked a charm. An innocent drink with a perfect stranger had put a spanner in the works, stoked up the delinquent, incorrigible flames that were now out of control, as if a dragon had been breathing on that fire, stoking it up all the more, while those divorce papers between them actually seemed to be lifting off and flying away in the wind. I mean, talk about bad luck. I wasn't even interested in the man, for goodness sake, despite his debonair good looks, beguiling wit, and ever so nice manners. In truth, he wasn't my type. Besides, I was done with relationships after having dated the biggest jerk on the entire planet that I discovered was having an affair with another man, so that was a low kick to the guts, one that I was still recovering from. Regretfully, like the biggest bundling idiot that I actually am, with the astute perception of a wayward gnat, I had agreed to have a little drink with him at a bar in town, which was a catastrophic mistake on my part, as I'd been spotted by the town's nosy ferrets, and then some, which had been the whole idea. It would seem that tongues began to wag, as they always do in a small town. Whispers abounded, as people sniggered and giggled, pointing accusatory fingers at me. "You've got a brass nerve," someone said to me in the bar. "And in broad daylight, too. You should be ashamed of yourself, little hussy. Kirsten is going to love you for this." Naturally, I had no way of knowing what on earth was going on, and why people were giving me such fierce, hostile and unkind looks. When I arrived at work the following day for my lunch shift, Kirsty was standing there, looking like a belligerent bull terrier. I could swear that I saw smoke emanating from her nostrils. She was incandescent with rage. She had her hands on her narrow hips and was glaring at me. "Had a nice evening last night, did we, Tamara?" she said, rolling my name on her tongue in a derogatory way. "Enjoyed your drink with Dustin, did you?" "I hope you did, because it's the most expensive drink you've ever had, girl." I stammered, looking at Kirsten awkwardly. What was she going on about? Why was she so enraged? "Sorry, Kirsten, but what you talking about?" "Don't lie to me, Tamara. I hate liars. You know. Everybody else knows. Don't play little Miss Ignorant Butter Won't Melt in My Mouth look with me, will you? It ain't going to wash with me. I wasn't born yesterday." "No what?" I asked. "That the man you had a drink with last night was Kirsten's ex-husband, Dustin, and they're still madly in love with each other," said Stacey, one of the other waitresses, bursting into the conversation. "Although, of course, they'll never admit it's true. I'm sorry, Tamara, but Kirsten's ex asked you out for a drink just to upset her. The oldest trick in the book, if you ask me." "Who said anything about my being in love with the man? Stacey, for goodness sake, we're divorced." "Methinks the lady protests too much," said Stacey, giving me a wink and bustling off to attend to her duties. I gawked. "I had no idea you were an item. It was only a drink, Kirsten. I'm not interested in Dustin in that way, and nothing happened. It was a perfectly innocent drink, I assure you." "I'm not going to sit here and listen to all this. All of it is lies." Kirsten growled at me. She lifted up the huge glass container of peppermints on the reception desk on the diner next to the till and threw it at me. It crashed on the linoleum floor, breaking up into hundreds of glass shards, while the peppermints went rolling and dancing all over the diner, underneath tables and in obscure places. "Clean this mess up," said Kirsten. "Every last shard of glass, every single peppermint. And then I want you out of here, out of my life, out of my diner. No one, I repeat, no one messes with my man, even if he is my ex. Do you understand?" There was no reasoning with Kirsty. She was convinced I'd known the stranger was her ex-husband, and my accepting a date from him had gone down like a lead balloon. I'm almost sure it revived the green-eyed monster from its slumber, as Kirsten's defiant, maddened look revealed that she was still in love with the man, and my intruding on that sacred space was filling her with a fury that would make an elephant in musk look like a teddy bear. The woman was literally foaming at the mouth. The vindictive look she gave me, well, let's not talk about that look. It still gives me the heebie-jeebies to this very day. It would seem that everybody in town had taken Kirsten's side, seen me as a wannabe who was trying to seduce her ex-husband. It was nasty being labelled like that, grossly unfair, utterly ridiculous, but my protestations became like a faint humming noise in the background, as no one was listening, nor did they even bother to listen, or even want to for that matter. As in a small town, when people have fixed ideas about something, they usually stick harder than chewing gum under a school kid's desk. "You should be ashamed of yourself," Miss Berglass had said to me. She was one of the elderly town residents. "I thought you were a nice girl, Tamara, but now I can see you for what you really are, a prize little slut. Fancy making a move on Tamara's ex like that, and rubbing her nose in it to boot. Have you no shame? The younger generation these days," she tutted under her breath, "they've got no idea about a damn thing." "For a start, Mrs. Berglass," I protested, "I'll have you know that I had no idea that Kirsten's ex was playing her to make her jealous. I didn't know who he was until this morning. Besides, they're divorced." "That's insignificant," piped Mrs. Berglass. "What's a piece of paper? Meaningless. Those two love the bones off each other. But you were determined to ruin it all. You little hussy." She shook her head belligerently, her sizable girth wobbling in indignation. "Frankly, Tamara, I'm absolutely appalled. I'm very, very ashamed of you." All I had left in the world was my pink Ford Mustang, which I didn't want to sell. I needed a job desperately. One was hard to come by, especially as any jobs going were not being handed over to me out of loyalty to Kirsten Tanner. So when I was in town at the baker's, I overheard a young lady talking about an au pair job that she was going to apply for. "I've got the interview in half an hour. It's outside Denver, so I'll be leaving shortly. Wish me luck. They're interviewing a few other people. I really want this job. It's board and lodgings and looking after an 8-month-old baby girl. The perfect job for me," she gloated. "I've got a feeling I'm going to get this one. But the only thing is they are interviewing other people this morning. So let's just keep the fingers crossed, shall we?" "Good luck, Marion," said the baker. "I'm sure they'll give you the job. You're absolutely brilliant with babies." "Here's hoping," she said. It was then that I had this bold, bright, irrational idea that came bursting into my mind. A moment of inspiration, if you like. It was on a whim I surreptitiously followed the young lady to her appointment. I know that may have been presumptuous of me, but I didn't care. When you're as desperate as I was for a job, my etiquette and social graces, I'm afraid, went flying out of the window faster than a kite. I was determined to apply for this job. I mean, what did I have to lose? It was everything I could ask for. Board and lodgings, a good salary, and of course looking after a baby girl. And I loved babies. I boldly followed the woman's truck down the drive from our small town to an attractive countrified neighbourhood, and parked next to this young girl's truck rather audaciously. But there was no point in pursuing things with a timid approach, I thought. The woman called Marion glanced at me briefly through her truck window. For a moment our eyes met. She hurriedly looked away. I could almost hear her audibly sigh. She rightly assumed I was another applicant for the job, which of course I was now. She was realising the competition had got infinitely greater, which meant her aspiring job, like a hot air balloon, would just sail away into the clouds, disappearing into the ether. Well, I hoped she was thinking that, but she did have a cocky look about her. She climbed out of her truck, slamming the car door behind her, giving me another furtive glance. She was holding in her hand a file, which I imagined was a highly exaggerated glossary of all the babies she had cared for in the past. I could almost see the reviews in my mind's eye. "Marion worked for me for 2 years. She was wonderful. Can't do without her," sort of thing. I wanted to throw up and be violently sick. I perceived she had all those incredible glowing references from previous au pair jobs, while I had absolutely nothing. She looked like the kind of girl the couple might hire on the spot, without even stopping to draw breath. She was a small woman with a brown pigtail and deep-set brown eyes, wearing a pretty conservative, modest frock, looking every bit the picture of efficiency, domestic bliss and no-nonsense rolled into one, as she strode up the steps with a mock confidence towards the gleaming white front door, framed by the canopy of the porch. I watched her obscured silhouette as she banged the locker. Moments later the door was open. She was bustled into the house. "Please don't give her the job," I was muttering to myself. "Please, please don't let her get the job. Please. I need it much more than she does." The house was a typical craftsman-style home, painted in a soft peach colour, with dark grey triangular roofs, overhanging eaves with exposed rafters and beams, heavily tapered columns, all painted in white, with patterned windowed panes and a covered porch. It was a very attractive home, situated on a sprawling park-like property, with perfectly manicured emerald green lawns, colourful flower beds bursting with bright cheerful colours, and scatterings of trees, some that had burst into fragrant pink blossoms, as well as a gleaming silvery pond that twinkled under the shafts of sunlight that bounced off its rippling surface in pretty rainbow-like prisms. To the rear of the property was a flowering meadow that was fringed by a woodgrove comprised of the viridescent spruce and logpole pine trees. Finally Marion left the house. I could see the confident smile on her face. She looked pretty assured that the job was almost a done deal. I would know that look anywhere, self-satisfied, assured and smug. I watched her get into her truck and drive away. It certainly undermined my confidence. I sighed, already seeing that opportunity of acquiring this job dwindling away before me, like a bird on the wind. Still, I'd got here, hadn't I? And so I would do my damnedest to get this job. I crossed my fingers and toes, said a tiny little prayer, which ended and began with, "Please God." I wasted no time in climbing out of my pink Ford Mustang, slamming the door gently behind me, straightening out my sweater with the inappropriate logo written across it, in gold print, which read, "You better believe I'm cool." Not exactly the kind of clothing you should wear for an interview like this. Still, beggars can't be choosers. I made the lonely trip to the front door with only my purse in my hands, while wearing a pair of blue jeans and a pair of neat-looking sneakers. I knocked at the door and was whisked into the living room. "Sorry, you are?" said a distinguished-looking man wearing a leather jacket, turtleneck top and dark jeans, whom I imagined was the husband. I was right. His name was Martin. "I'm Tamara Holden," I said. The woman looked up at me, glancing at the paper briefly. "The agency never mentioned a Tamara Holden," she said, beckoning for me to take a seat, on what I can only describe as the most luxurious couch that I'd ever seen. I sat on its edge awkwardly, not daring to get too comfortable or even familiar, my toes tapping the wooden floor beneath me, my fingers trembling. What the heck am I doing here, I thought. She's never, ever going to hire me in a month of Sundays. I tried desperately to smile, but it was a fixed, painted-on smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Oh, what a beautiful home you have here," I said, glancing around the room nervously. "The furnishings, they're so classic, but stylish. I love the contemporary artwork on your wall, along with the bright scatter cushions. Oh, and those glorious rugs of yours. You've coordinated everything so well. I love the bright touches of colour. They bring the room to life." "Well, I try," said the woman, failing to hide the pleased smile on her face. I noticed she had beautiful Titian colouring, blue eyes and a fair porcelain skin. She was a very attractive woman, who had the kind of aristocratic look you would expect to see in the pre-war years in the likes of movies like Downton Abbey. She had that lady of the mansion look, a younger version of Maggie Smith in her prime. She was wearing white cotton pants and a blue and white striped top that were clearly designer. "So tell me about yourself, Tamara. What kind of experience have you had with children? More to the point, infants that require diaper changes, introduction to solids, breast milk feedings." "Look," I said awkwardly, I will be straight with you. I've never worked as a professional au pair before, but I do have a great deal of experience with babies and children." "You've never been an au pair?" said the woman, looking at me with a transfixed expression of baffled astonishment that revealed itself clearly in her pale blue eyes.
How can I possibly hire you without any references? That would be very insane. Why on earth would the agency send someone like you to my abode? It's nonsensical. I need someone with lots of experience. I did make that very clear to them. Well, that's so easily redeemed, I assured her. Please give my Aunt Judy a call, please. I've looked after her kids from whence they were babies. I've changed their diapers, introduced the babies to solids, played with them, read them books, taught them artwork. She'll tell you I'm a natural with kids. At that, the woman sighed, eyeing me warily through her blue eyes, as if trying to get the measure of me. She promptly picked up the receiver and began to dial my aunt. I don't know why I'm doing this, she muttered. It goes against protocol. Yes, that's right. My name is Hannah Walterskew. I'm presently interviewing your niece, a young woman called Tamara. Yes, that's right. She's with me now. She's applying for this job as an au pair with me, a paid au pair. I understand that she's looked after your children in recent years. Could you tell me how good she was with them, especially when they were wearing diapers and being introduced to solids, because that's very important for me. It seemed like my aunt was talking at the other end of the line for quite a substantial period of time. So you think I can trust her completely? You do. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your help. You've been so informative. She said that, putting down the phone. Well, said Mrs. Walterskew, looking up at me, that was positively the most glowing reference I've ever heard. Your aunt didn't hold back on her effusive praise of you. What was it she said? In all my born days, I've never met anyone so good with kids as Tamara is. You'll never find anyone to equal her. If you don't hire her on the spot, you'll regret it. It seems your aunt thinks you're a natural with children. Maybe I should give you a chance, but it's only because all the au pairs that I've had of late have really let me down. The last one in particular, dreadful girl, she just bogged off. I can't have someone with neurotic energy looking after my daughter. It could rub off negatively on my girl. Previously, I've employed young ladies that are much more formal than you. Perhaps that's where I've been going so terribly wrong. Maybe a more relaxed approach will suit Amelia better. Look, I'll give you a 2-week trial. If I'm happy with your performance, you can have the job. I'm out during the day with my husband. I'm an interior designer. My husband's an architect. We work together as a team. We have offices not too far from here. I'm a phone call away in an emergency. Now, we do have a cleaning team who come here twice a week to give the house the once-over. You'll be staying in the bedroom adjacent to the baby's nursery. I'll set up a baby monitor in there for you. And so it was I moved into the Walterskew home and began to look after little Amelia, who was an 8-month-old babbling baby that was clapping all the time so happily, making cute sounds, already crawling. She was absolutely adorable, with the brightest, most gorgeous blue eyes that I've ever seen, and the chubbiest cheeks. I could not imagine why a mother would not want to enjoy this short magical time with their baby, as it's over so very quickly. It was clear that Hannah Walterskew was a busy woman, driven by her business. That came first. I felt as if I'd landed on my feet in this beautiful, sumptuous home, where no expense had been spared. But the house had been designed for comfort in mind, with sweeping oak floors, contemporary rugs, exquisite artworks on the walls, and fabulously stylish furnishings. During the days I looked after little Amelia, I always erected a play pen designed for 8-month-old kids under the shade of the large oak tree in the backyard, where little Amelia could crawl around to her heart's content and play with some of her square blocks and other toys. I knew she was safe there. While the annoying hunger signals in my brain were firing on all cylinders, I couldn't refuse them. I could watch Amelia from the kitchen through the glass sliding windows that overlooked the old oak tree. In that short space of time, she would be absolutely fine. I picked up Amelia in my arms, gave her a quick cuddle. She chuckled and clapped her hands. I then placed her back into the pen. I'll be back in a second, I told her, scurrying quickly to the kitchen, where I busied myself preparing a sandwich. I layered slices of cheese and ham on pieces of whole wheat bread with slices of beef tomato and curls of lettuce. As I was doing this, I glanced out of the window to see how Amelia was doing. The knife I'd been buttering fell out of my hands, crashing onto the cork floor, as I stared at Amelia's playpen, as if I was seeing a ghost. For standing over the pen, bending down on its haunches, was the most peculiar creature I've ever seen in my entire life. Amelia was gurgling, laughing at this thing, pulling at its hair. You would have thought my first reaction was to run and scream at the top of my lungs, but I was frozen to the spot, paralysed by a stupefied shock. The creature, clearly female, as I could see a couple of breasts jutting through the layers of long flowing dark hair, that covered her dense, powerful torso. The creature unhesitantly picked up Amelia, lifting her up in the air, easily 7 feet off the ground, her delighted eyes focusing on Amelia's response. She was bobbing her above in her arms as if she was flying the little girl, and judging by Amelia's expression, she was loving the fuss, and of course the strange flying game that she was engaged in. What on earth was this thing, I wondered? It was covered in hair with a human-looking face and a pyramid-shaped head, low slung upon its shoulders. I could tell it was a monstrously huge creature based on its large girth and burly proportions. I mean, it was built like a truck, very solid, hefty, substantial. All of a sudden, the female creature appeared to be sniffing the air, wrinkling up her nose in disgust and distaste, as if to locate the source of a very foul, unpleasant stench. The creature lifted Amelia's nappy close to her nose, and recoiled in disgust. She now knew where the smell was coming from. Amelia probably needed her nappy changing. To my horror, the creature bounced to her feet, running off with Amelia in her arms, and they glided away together towards the wood grove, aligned with blue spruces, engelmans, and logpole pines. What the heck? I thought. I had to be in the middle of a nightmare from which I would surely wake. All of a sudden I heard the most god-awful scream, and I realized that I was the one that was making the noise. Suddenly it was as if my frozen state had dissipated. I finally came to my senses as I began to bound through the sliding doors, down the patio steps, towards the old oak tree. All I could hear myself was saying, "Oh, no, please, no, God, no!" I glanced at the playpen. Sure enough, Amelia was nowhere to be seen. "Oh, no, oh, my word, no, please, no!" She was gone from my sight. I knew I hadn't imagined what I'd seen. My senses filled with unadulterated horror as I realized the 8-month-old was well and truly gone. I can't describe to you those moments of realizing that a baby put in your charge is now missing, abducted by the most peculiar creature I'd ever seen. I couldn't imagine what I would tell the parents, the looks I would get when I blamed her abduction on a huge, hairy humanoid creature with ape-like influences to its appearance. For a start, no one would believe a word of it. I'd look like I'd lost my marbles, that I should be booking into the nearest psychological unit for mental evaluations. I could even see Hannah shaking her head in disgust and saying, "I should have never let that woman into our home and trusted her aunt's biased recommendations. Anyone can see she's as nutty as a fruitcake." All these horrifying scenarios were building up in my head like a pressure cooker that was about to explode in any given minute. So I charged through the woods like a bull in a china shop as I aimlessly called the little girl's name. "Amelia! Amelia! Amelia!" The tears were pouring down my face. In a trice, helplessness consumed me, while a deep gut-wrenching nausea as bitter as gall rose up in the back of my throat. Truly, if I had had time to spare, of which I had none, I would have gone directly to the bushes and hurled up the contents of my stomach, as my biliousness was unceasing, hammering away at my guts like the rough ocean waves hitting a rock, pounding him over and over again without reprieve. Apart from anything else, I loved the little girl, almost as if she was my own. Her cute little face, the gurgles she made, her animated expression when she pointed at things, the way she laughed and chuckled, especially when I fed her with a spoon and asked her to open her mouth for the chuk-chuk train, which she always found highly amusing and very entertaining. She would laugh as she opened her mouth out wide, accepting the spoon of pureed pear that I parked into her mouth. She would oscillate her arms and point to the spoon, and once again the chuk-chuk train would start up all over again to deliver some more pear puree into her mouth. At this precious time in her life, she was beginning to make audible sounds. Before long she would be saying words like mama, dada. But now she was gone, vanished completely from her playpen like a willowing wisp of smoke. I knew what I had to do. I needed to call her parents at once, call the sheriff, as I was alone on the property. I was never going to find her on my own, but what the heck was I going to say about her abductor? Would anyone believe a word of it? In their shoes, I certainly wouldn't. I ran past the playpen, up the steps of the patio, through the sliding doors towards the phone, and I began to dial Hannah's number. "Hannah speaking. How can I help you?" came the familiar business-like voice. "Hannah," I cried down the receiver while still glancing out of the glass sliding windows to view the desolate scene before me, my fingers trembling, my voice unstable, too unstable to disguise its unsteady wobbliness. A whole lump the size of a golf ball was trapped in the back of my throat. Then I suddenly saw a hazy, dense, vertical tower of black snaking through the trees, getting larger and larger and larger, as it neared its graceful approach, until it became much more defined, sharper in focus, and that was when I saw the large humanoid creature returning with Amelia in her arms. She was bobbing the child affectionately on her hips, rocking her up and down, her eyes filled with an incredible devoted love. Finally, her overlong arms replaced her in the playpen, while Amelia began to cry in protest when the creature left her, as she clearly didn't want the anomalous creature to go. She was not usually that responsive to strangers. She wobbled on her chubby legs as she tried to haul herself to her feet so that she was balancing over the bright pink walls of her playpen, while her tiny little hands were waving. The creature gave her one more doting look and promptly glided away into the woods, moving with an astonishing grace, with her arms swinging backwards and forwards in a marching motion. Tamara, is that you? Tamara, is that you? Is something wrong? Is everything all right with Amelia? Yes, it's me, I said, trying to compose myself, drawing in a huge relieved breath. It's me. Look, Tamara, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm very busy. I told you not to phone me unless it was important. What is going on? Is everything all right? I think Amelia said mummy, I said, lying quickly through my teeth, thinking fast on my feet, for the ideal, perfect excuse to excuse my random telephone call. Really? Said Hannah's voice softening at the other end of the phone. She said mummy. Amelia said mummy. Oh, my word, came a gasp and an animated voice. Oh, Amelia said mummy. I think so, I said. Hannah sounded elated. Did you hear that, sweetheart? I could hear her say to her husband, Amelia said mummy. Her first words, mummy. Now that's a milestone. Please note, sweetheart, she didn't say daddy first. I heard, said the voice of her husband, that sounded less than amused. Our daughter said mama and not dada, and dada's so much easier to say. Don't rub it in, sweetheart. I'm sorry to have phoned, Hannah, I apologised profusely. I just thought you should know. Oh, I appreciate you phoning, Tamara. This is a very big deal. I think it was very important you phoned. I don't think the other au pairs I hired would have been on the ball like you are. You're doing a sterling job, Tamara. Well done. I'm incredibly impressed with you, young lady. And Amelia loves you to boot. I put down the receiver, dashing out of the sliding doors, down the patio steps towards the playpen. Amelia was busying herself with some play bricks, piling them on top of each other. I lifted dear, sweet, darling Amelia up into my arms to embrace her with a huge, affectionate cuddle, while bountiful tears of relief flowed down my cheeks like the raindrops on a glass pane. And that was when I discovered she wasn't wearing her nappy. It had been discarded, but in its place I noticed that instead of a nappy, a pasting of overlapping leaves had been applied to her bum, but with such a masterful precision. It was a thick padding of leaves, tied together with twine, that had been placed over the baby's derriere, almost a direct imitation of the nappy that she'd previously been wearing. I was stunned, impressed, amazed, baffled to see that whatever this creature was, it had not only discarded the old dirty diaper, but cleaned little Amelia up, possibly at the stream, and applied vine leaves to her bum. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen, but thank God Amelia was back safe and well, and in the end that was all that actually mattered. I knew then that whatever this hairy humanoid was, it clearly had no intention of harming the little girl, but I still didn't want to take any chances, so I knew from now on I needed to watch over the little mite with extra vigilance. I knew better than to tell Hannah and her husband about what had happened to their little daughter that day, for I wisely discerned that I would most certainly have been given my marching orders. I needed this job. Besides, I loved looking after little Amelia. One day I received a surprise visit from my boss at the diner, whom I hadn't seen for a considerable long period of time. I got the shock of my life when I saw Kirsten's familiar truck rolling up the driveway and making a screeching sound as it stopped. The woman got out. I remember thinking, what the heck does she want? This is all I need, another confrontation with the woman from the diner. I opened the front door as she neared her approach. Can I come in? She asked me, looking ever so slightly bashful. I'm probably the last person you want to see. I do realise that. I've heard via the grapevine you're an au pair now. Word gets around fast in these parts. That's right, I said tightly. Come in. Little Amelia was on a little swing set in the kitchen and chuckled happily to see our new visitor. So this is your charge, said Kirsten, leaning over to give Amelia her little cheeks a tug. She's adorable. This beats waiting tables any day of the week. What do you want, Kirsten? I asked stiffly. I want to apologise to you for the way I treated you at the diner. It was unacceptable to treat you like that. I'm so sorry for turning the townsfolk against you too. It was very wrong. Why the change of heart? I asked, busying myself by putting a kettle on the gas hob to make some coffee for my guest. Because I'm a bloody idiot, that's why, she said, showing me the glittering diamond now on her finger. You're married? I gasped. That's incredible. Who's the lucky man? Last weekend I remarried my husband Dustin, the man you went out to drinks with. We both went off to Vegas to tie the knot. But why? I don't understand. I thought you were divorced. Because we love each other, that's why. We can't live without each other. But for so long, we've been at each other's throats, suspicious, jealous all the time. We've been receiving counselling to curb those issues in our lives. The therapist believes we both have issues with trust, as we are victims of being abandoned by our mothers early in life, which has affected our personal relationships. It turns out that my husband is staunchly loyal. He told the therapist that after I came along, he's never given another woman a fleeting glance. Well, I'm very happy for you, and congratulations on your wedding. But I promise you, I only went out with him for a drink. I wasn't interested in him, as lovely as he is, but he's not my type. I know, Dustin told me. He said he had to push you to agree to have that drink with him, that you weren't keen at all. He also affirmed you had no clue that he was my ex. That's why he actually asked you for that drink. So he was using me as a pawn on a chess game to make you jealous, I said. Something like that. I'm really sorry, Tamara. It's all right, I said, giving my friend a warm hug. I'm glad the dust has settled. I would hate to have lost our friendship. But promise me any time soon you won't be throwing peppermints at me or breaking any glass. I promise, she giggled. To cut a long story short, I worked as an au pair for Hannah and her husband for over 6 years and became an intrinsic member of their family and a godmother to little Amelia. Hannah's husband introduced me to his younger brother Roy. The moment we met, well, let's just say we fell hard for each other, so we got married and had 3 children of our own that have long since fled the nest. I have never shared this story with anyone before, because there are some things best left unsaid. Until now, in this forum, when I thought I'd get my story told. After all, Amelia is fully grown now. I realise the creature who changed her nappy for a diaper of vine leaves was in fact a Bigfoot. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, goodbye and good night.